Okay, the next system we're going to be focusing on is going to be the muscular system. Now, the muscular system is directly linked with the skeletal system because of the factor of movement. Okay, you need both to work in concert with each other to provide movement for the system, for the body. So let's get into the muscular system. There are different types of muscles. You have skeletal muscle. Um, Pretty straightforward, that name. Okay, it's muscles that are usually attached to bones of the skeleton that aid in movement. Um, a name we usually call these muscles striated muscles, and we'll look at what that means in a little bit. Um, the skeletal muscles are going to be more fibrous. They're going to be built and with more slender fibers. Allow those fibers to grow um, depending on the use of the muscles. Um, they're also going to include connective tissue, okay, built into the muscle, blood vessels built into the muscle, and nerves that are going to be built into the muscle. Then you have smooth muscles. Smooth muscles are usually muscles found within involuntary processes, like in the walls of the stomach. The stomach walls are going to be used to um, they will contract and release to move foods around within the stomach to help aid in that first stage of digestion. Um, Smooth muscles can be found within the intestines, okay, to not only for absorption but to involuntarily contract, okay, to move uh, that digested food through the intestinal tract. Blood vessels are going to be made up of smooth muscles, okay, to help aid in blood flow and involuntary movement of blood flow. The heart. Well, we'll get to the heart in a minute. So that would be smooth muscle. And then cardiac. Here's your heart. Okay, cardiac muscle is the only type of muscle, um, or is the only muscle that's going to be made up into the heart. So the heart is the only place where you can find cardiac muscle. It is striated, just like skeletal muscles. Now, the striations uh, allow for striated muscles allow for these muscle fibers to move past each other, okay, to build up friction and build up resistance, and helps with movement of the body, helps lifting things, helps uh, movement of other objects that are used by the muscular system. So the striated muscle is also going to be uh, that process is also going to be used in a cardiac muscle, but they're smaller. These muscle cells that are in the cardiac muscle are smaller. They're not necessarily voluntary, even though it's an involuntary process like the smooth muscles. So let's look at how muscles contract, how we use our muscles to move the body and to move other things with the body. Um, Muscles are, if you go from muscle cells, then they're going to be built into muscle tissue, which would be the filaments, then myofibrils, and then actually muscle fibers. So this is the stage of progression that muscles are built from cells into filaments, then these myofibrils, and then eventually to muscle fibers. Um, these filaments, there's an alternating pattern of these filaments. Some will be thick, some will be thinner. They are going to be made of myosin, okay, and actin. These are two types of muscle filaments, myosin and actin. The myosin um, and actin are going to be part of the striated muscles in the skeletal muscle. Now, when a contraction occurs, okay, if you were to pick up your book or pick up a drink or pick up your phone and lift it, okay, muscles in your arm are contracting, and that's actually what happens when contraction occurs. Are those thin filaments are going to slide over the thick filaments? Okay, so this alternating pattern of thin and thick filaments, okay, that build into the muscle fiber, they're going to slide against each other. All right, when that happens, that's going to allow for the muscle to pull or lift whatever um, object is being lifted, okay, by the arm. Um, Now let's look at how muscles and bones interact. You have skeletal muscles. Remember, we've already talked about the different types. These skeletal muscles are going to be attached to bones using tendons. So the connective tissue that attaches muscles to bones is going to be tendons. And what happens when contraction occurs? A muscle contracts. It's going to produce or generate a force within that bone, causing that bone or that body part to move. That's very scientific in the way you look at it because we don't think about it that way. We've learned through learning behaviors as we've grown how to walk and how to pick things up and how to move. But what's actually happening is as those muscles contract, as those filaments slide across each other and causing a muscle to contract, that's what's causing that particular body part or that motion to occur, is that muscle being attached to the bone for that particular part of the body. So let's look at the next system, the integumentary system. The integumentary system is also linked with the skeletal and muscular system, and we'll look at how in a minute. But the integumentary system is all of the parts of the body that we see. Okay, it's the skin, the hair, the nails, and there's even some glands that are built within the skin that if we use the microscope we can see. But that's all the parts of the integumentary system: the skin, hair, and nails. Skin is the one we notice obviously right up front because that's the largest organ system of the body that we see as far as surface area. Okay, our whole entire structure is covered with skin. Its main purpose is protection. Okay, it's the barrier that's built on our actual system that keeps everything in the outside environment out, and then makes sure to protect and maintain all of the stuff that's on the inside environment. It also serves as a barrier for against infection and injury. Okay, the number of times you bump against something, whether it be your arm or a leg, the skin is built to absorb that shock that is produced when the body bumps or rubs against something. Infection. Remember, we've talked about bacteria and viruses that are all over the place. The skin is a barrier to make sure that those cannot easily enter the body system or the body itself. The skin helps regulate body temperature. Okay, remember those nerves that are attached to that I talked about. They run all the way to the skin. And there's that process called negative feedback, where, for example, if it's cold outside, okay, those nerves interpret that in your skin, that's in your skin, and then your skin responds by shivering, and that's just the way it's the muscles attached to the skin that actually start contracting very quickly, very violently, and the shivering would help increase blood flow, which then would help increase temperature. So they help regulate body temperature. They help remove wastes. They help cool the body down. Okay, that's another way of regulating body temperature, and they also protect against UV radiation. Okay. So let's get into the layers of the skin. You have the epidermis. Now, dermis is skin. Okay. You have the epidermis, which is the outer layer. The outer layer of the skin is made of a protein called keratin. And it gets replaced about every 4 to 5 weeks. So this is constantly exposed to elements, wind, weathering, water flow. Okay, so it's going to be replaced about every 4 to 5 weeks. Keratin is also found in the hair and the nails. So the keratin protein is also what helps form the hair and nails. This outer epidermis contains cells that produce melanin. Now, melanin is that pigment, that coloring pigment that produces the color of the skin. The dermis, the middle layer, if you will, is going to be the inner layer, or the middle layer of the skin is the dermis. This is where collagen fibers are found. Now, collagen, another type of protein, but collagen fibers are found. That gives the skin its elasticity, its flexibility. Blood vessels are going to be found here. Nerve endings, okay, to help with the interactions with the outside environment and the inside environment of the body. Glands will be found here. There's going to be um, glands that secrete oils, okay, that aid in the continual health and maintenance of the skin. There's sensory receptors, some smooth muscles, and then hair follicles for hair growth. And then the it's not on here, but the very inner layer, the bottom layer of the skin that actually separates the skin from what's under the skin, which would be muscle tissue, and then bone tissue would be the endodermis, the very inner layer of the skin. All right, the next layer, or the next system we're going to focus on, is going to be the circulatory system. Humans, remember we've talked a little bit about this when we talked about animals. Humans have a closed circulatory system, not an open, but a closed circulatory system, which means that the blood is contained within a system of vessels that includes the heart, that includes blood vessels, blood veins, arteries. We have different names for the vessels depending on how big they are and what they connect to. But you have the blood vessels and heart, so it's a closed circulatory system that's kept within this cycling parts. Okay, it's not open; it's closed. Your heart muscle. Let's talk about it a little bit. It actually is going to contract about 72 times a minute, okay, on average. Depending on body size, depending on body weight, that type of thing, it could be a little bit more, a little bit less, but on average. And it pumps about 70 milliliters of blood each time the heart contracts. So if you were to feel your heart beating, okay, you would notice that there is about a there's a two contractions about every second to half a second. So every time it does that, it's going to pump about 70 milliliters of blood per contraction. So during the year, okay, your heart can actually pump enough blood to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Okay, so those swimming pool that the Olympians swim in during, during all of those contests. Think about how big those are, and you could fill that size of a swimming pool with the amount of blood that your heart pumps each year on average. Now your heart, we are focusing on the heart because it's the main part of the circulatory system. Your heart is divided into four sections, okay, two halves, four sections. The two halves are actually divided by something called a septum. So it's a wall, it's an inner thick muscle a wall of the inner part of the heart that runs along the middle, separating the left and right. And this septum helps prevent blood that's carrying oxygen from mixing with blood that isn't carrying oxygen, because you want to make sure to keep those separate. That way, the blood that's carrying oxygen makes it out of the heart and to the body parts that need oxygen, and then when that blood gets done transporting that oxygen, it comes back and then goes through the part of the heart that pumps it to the lungs so it can pick up more oxygen and then gets moved again. So that septum helps keep those separated. Here is a picture. You definitely want to know it. Definitely want to know the flow of blood in the different parts. But here are your four chambers, okay, separated by the septum, the thick muscle that separates the two halves. But the right side of the heart, you have the right atrium and right ventricle. Then the left side of the heart, you have the left atrium and left ventricle. The atriums are the top sections of the heart, and the ventricles are the bottom sections. Notice there are valves, okay, that are going to be like faucet spouts that can control blood flow from one chamber to the next. Okay, you have your aorta. You have part of the heart, part of the veins, the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, these pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins. Those are all important to know location. The mitral valve, make sure you're good with this one because it's the one that separates the left atrium and ventricle. The tricuspid valve is the one that separates the right atrium and right ventricle. And then the pulmonary valve for the pulmonary artery and so forth. So make sure you're good with the parts of the heart.